We like idioms here, right? How do we best describe the meteoric rise of the Nautilus and the arrival of the Cubitus? It's all gone square-shaped. Yeah, that'll work. I have been holding back on this topic. It's been over a month since this collection arrived, and many of you have been asking me to weigh in on the Cubitus debate. This is a watch that has undoubtedly become one of the most talked about subjects of 2024, and it'll probably go on into the future. Maybe that was the entire purpose of this launch in the first place. Of course, with a watch like this, there has been a lot of discussion, infighting, devotees of the brand who think Patek can do no wrong, criticisms of its design choice and the direction that it went, all of which perpetuated and backed by some very choice words by Patek's president. So my methodology with these sorts of videos, I like to try and approach them differently. I look at what has been given to us, and I consider what it means on a larger scale, what it represents. How did a cult classic become a Cubitus? That was the underlying sentence that I really wrote before starting this video. I think the main reason why it caused such a flare-up is it just feels so anti-Patek Philippe. It feels so against what they do. To understand the broader scope of what this watch represents, we look to a model like the Nautilus, which very much defined the 1970s. Say what we like about it, it is an icon as a design. It's not a piece that everyone loves and respects, but it has a tremendous footprint and has made such a massive impact in the watch collecting community. We moved 20 or so years later into the Aquanaut era. This watch was created to try and revitalize the image of the Nautilus in a way, to create a watch that was designed and intended for a younger market, a younger audience, the children of the millionaires, and it was insanely successful. These two watches, though they do come from the same brand, their design, the image that they have, are polar opposites. And so when the Cubitus arrived, it's a piece, compared to these two, that has no underlying identity of its own. It's very much an amalgamation, it's a homologation of past classics. And I think that's why, to an extent, we are quite frustrated about it. At least that's one of the underlying issues. Since the launch of the Audemars Piguet Code 1159, I don't think there has been such a debate as hot as this. But where the 1159 did dare to be different, almost deviating too far away from the image that Audemars Piguet has established for themselves, this Nautilus Cubitus, on the other hand, is playing it far too safe. The real irony about this watch is that Patek does not want to be defined by the sports watch. They've said it multiple times. Thierry Stern has said it himself. They went to the lengths of discontinuing the steel Nautilus to try and distance themselves from this image. Because Patek has always been defined by their classic pieces, their perpetual calendars, annual calendars, incredible chronographs, Calatravas, ellipses. Historically, the Nautilus and the Aquanaut, they have only ever been small pieces of the Patek pie. So to say all of this, to stick to your guns, to eradicate the steel Nautilus, only to then re-establish another sports watch that doesn't look as good, it's counterintuitive. My journey with the Patek Philippe Nautilus began with the 5712R, leather strap deploy and clasp, and this piece, I thought it to be a masterpiece. It is alternative, it is unique, it has a lot of interesting design DNA. And what made the Nautilus such an impressive piece from the beginning was it was established to be a svelte, slim, easy-wearing sports watch. One that was able to seamlessly blend the dressier quality of a watch with an underlying sports nature. Even to this day, it has a space-age quality to it. And what the Cubitus has done, which I do find quite fascinating, is that it has built on this motif. And let's be fair, it's pretty ballsy to use that original design as your base plate and commit to something that is very similar in design but is also kind of different. But you see, in the same breath, I look to Patek's 5811, their most recent Nautilus, white gold with micro adjustment on the clasp, better water resistance, a small frame around the date window, very minor adjustments. And this, to me, it is their magnum opus. There is nothing about this watch I would want to see changed. It is the most modern, but it's also the best Nautilus they have ever made. And I keep asking myself the question of why is it that the Cubitus needs to exist next to it? More to the point, what is its purpose? Does it exist being larger in size, more brash, easier to see from a distance, for the sake of external marketing being seen on the wrists of celebrities, those sorts of purposes? Is it a piece that has been created for a younger audience, like me, judging by the advertising that has gone into this piece? Is it for that college graduate? Is this supposed to represent the next chapter of the Aquanaut for the next generation? And before getting deeper into the design criticism as I wrap up this video, there are so many other square watches out there worth looking at. And I ask myself, was Patek looking at a brand like Jaeger-LeCoultre and the Reverso? Were they looking at a piece like the Cartier Santos, which has one of the most incredible histories of all watches, the extra large? Were they trying in some way to follow this direction with the Cubitus line? Now, this is also important to add. Being in my privileged position, I have friends out there, not only those who own this watch at this point, but those who have experienced it and couldn't care less for it. So just as polarizing as it is for those of us who cannot afford and do not want to own the watch, those who can afford and own the watch feel the same way. So as to my design opinions on this piece, everyone has an opinion about this watch. Everyone has criticized the design, maybe offered suggestions, which I will do just now. The truth is, I have taken so long to make this video because I care so little for it that my opinion about it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's as harsh as you could be about a design, really. You care so little for it that, it doesn't even affect you. If given all of the options, the creative decision to say yes or no about this watch, the Cubitus would not exist. And if I was one responsible for coming up with a new and fresh and exciting design, I would be looking at the Ellipse collection 100%, marrying elements of that with the Beta 21 from the 1970s. Why is it that a piece like this couldn't have a television-style case with a more elaborate, unbelievable space-age woven bracelet of some kind? There was just so much potential for where this line could go, that ultimately the Cubitus played it safe by referring to a design that is pre-established. Let's try and get these unfiltered thoughts out there and sum this up as best as possible. The Cubitus collection, it does not add anything to the sports watch equation between the Nautilus and the Aquanaut. What we have here is a watch that is so wildly and unashamedly derivative that I do not believe it speaks to Patek Philippe's image, especially when we consider that they have tried their best to distance themselves from the sports watch lineup, only to bring in a new piece. Creating a watch that's this safe in design, I think, was a reaction to a piece like the Code 1159, which was such a deviation from the craze that the Royal Oak created for that line. The reaction to this watch has been highly contested, but in the opposite. Not for being bold and kind of questionable with their choices, but rather for being too cautious. And this is the one sentence that I have held off since the beginning of this video that I think perfectly encapsulates what the Cubitus represents. When the Patek Philippe Nautilus picked up in hype, in appeal, grey market sales, the costs of these watches, it was a watch that could do no wrong between 2015, 2017, 2020. Everyone and their grandmother knew what this watch was, and it largely perpetuated the craze and the trend for the integrated sports watch. As we know now, there are at least 50 plus Swiss-made integrated bracelet sports watches available from every brand you can possibly think of. And with the arrival of the Cubitus, it has, in many ways, subliminally put the largest nail in the proverbial coffin of the integrated sports watch craze. In more ways than one, it does bookmark the end of a time. As a design, I truly don't have an opinion of it. You can either like it or not. But on principle, it screams of a quiet desperation that Patek does not need to be a successful brand. They have created and they still do create some of the most beautiful watches in the world. The Nautilus 5811 is a magnum opus. Their Calatrava range is looking back to the 1930s but transitioning into a more modern stance, and they look great for it. Their perpetual calendars, their inline calendars, they continue to impress. In so many ways, they have surpassed their contemporaries, and they continue to do so, which is why the Cubitus, as an idea, does not need to factor into the equation at all. So the debates are still flying, but now that everything has simmered down quite a bit, what is your take on the Cubitus range? Do you find that the square forms of this watch is more congruent? Or do you, like me, feel that it's a piece that simply doesn't need to be here? Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. See you in the next one.